Hello, I'm Josh. I'm on the product team here at Skuid. In this video, I'm going to introduce you to model conditions. Model conditions are used to limit the data returned from an object to a model. It's a way to filter out the data that you don't want to get to the data that you do want. By the end of this video, we'll have constructed a very simple page where we will have two table components. One that will have a list of contact records filtered, meaning that we'll have applied a model condition to limit the data that we're displaying in this table component. And we'll have another table component that shows what it looks like when you don't have model conditions and you let your model pull in all the data from an object. Let's get started. I'm beginning from Skuid Central. I'm going to click Create Page. I'm going to give this new page that I'm creating a name. I call it Contact List. And I'm going to spell it correctly too. Now we're going to load the composer. In the composer, if you're new to Skuid, at the top we have what we call the palette, where we have the elements pane here on the left, where we have things like our components and our models. On the right is what we call the properties pane. Anything that you select in this elements pane, the properties available to that item will show up over here on the right. And down here's the canvas where we will be dragging and dropping components in. Any of the components or even the page itself that you select down here, the properties will be available up here on the right. To get started with this page, we're going to add a model. So click on the Models tab in the Elements pane, then click on the Add New Model icon, and we have ourselves an empty model. Let's start by giving this model a name. We should give it a unique and descriptive name. I can't talk and type at the same time. Sorry for the pause. We're going to give it a unique and descriptive name because it makes it easier for anybody else to follow up with this page and see by looking at the model name what this model actually does. In this case, as you might guess from the name, it's going to have contact records, but it's not going to be filtered. We're in a Salesforce dev org, so I'm going to leave the data source type and data source as they are, but I do need to select an object for this model to pull data from. And since I've mentioned contacts several times, you would be right to guess that contact object is the object we're after. So I'll select that from the pick list. Now I'm going to change one other property here. It's one that I don't recommend you change very often, but since we are experimenting and learning here, we can break the rules a little bit. Max number of records, as you would guess, is a property that limits how many records are retrieved by the model from the object. Normally, you don't want to have all the records from an object. Some people might think you do, but you really don't, because that could be hundreds or thousands of records, and as you might guess, with all of that data, it might slow down page load time and responsiveness. So generally, Skuid sets it at 20, but in this case, we're going to remove the limits for this model. Because I'm in a dev org, Salesforce helpfully provides a sample set of data, and there's only about 20 contact records in it. So it's okay for me to break this rule. Well, I have my basic properties set up, but I don't have any fields selected. So I'm going to click on the property node for fields. The reason I need to add fields is that Skuid does not assume which fields you want on each record. You don't need all of these fields that are on the contact records. So we're just going to choose the ones that we want for our experimental case. And in this situation, I'm going to choose contact ID, department, email, first name, last name. Just 5 fields. I'll click Save there. So now I have a model that's ready to load when the page loads, and I have the fields I want selected, but I don't have a data component yet that can display the data in this model. So I'm going to click on the Components tab in the Elements pane. I'm going to scroll down in the list till I find the table, or I can just use the search, and then drag and drop the table component down into the canvas. Now I have my table. make sure the header of the table is selected to get the table properties. And I'm going to change a couple of these properties. First of all, I'm going to give this table a title. That way, when we look at the page in preview, when we look at the page in runtime, we'll be able to see from the title what data is being listed in the table. Contacts not filtered. I'm also going to change one other property here. I'm going to go to this. I'm going to the display tab, and I'm going to change the pagination property. So make sure pagination is selected on the left, and over here, Skuid by default shows 10 visible rows or 10 records. The assumption is you don't want to have a long list of records scrolling way down the page if you have lots of records in the model. So we default to 10. In this case, again, we're breaking some of the rules because we're experimenting. We're going to have this table component show all the records that are in the model. Show all. And click Save again. I've set up my basic table properties, but I need to tell the table which fields on the records I want it to show. So in the table, I need to click the Add Fields button, click Model Fields, and then I'm going to add the fields I want to show in the page. Contact ID, department, email, first name, last name. Click Apply. And then if I selected them out of order or want to rearrange it now that I've looked at it, I might move them around. For example, I might want to put email and department at the end of this list. And I'll click Save. Let's take a look at what we've done so far. I click Preview, and here is our page as it is. And I have 40 contact records in my model. I think the default on a brand new, fresh dev org, a Salesforce dev org, is about 20, but I've got 40 in this case. And this shows you how and this is demonstrating what it's like when you don't have a model condition on the model and you don't have a record limit. The model will get all of the contact records out of the contact object, and the data component that we're using, the table, will faithfully display all of those records. Now, it's not likely that you will, when you're building pages, that you will want to be showing all the records in your objects all of the time. Usually there's a specific set of data that you want your users to interact with. That's where our model conditions come in. So we're going to go back to the composer where we will build another model, and we'll add a model condition on it so that we can see what it actually does. But for a quick definition of a model condition, a condition is a way to limit the data that is returned from an object to the model. Think of it as a way to filter out the data you don't want so that you get the data you do want. So let's go to the Models tab. And because this model that I'm going to create is very similar to the model we've already created, I'm going to, instead of building a new model from scratch, I'm going to clone this existing model. So I'm going to click the Clone Model button, and now I have two models. This cloned model, I'm going to change its name because I want it to be unique and descriptive. Now this model ID describes what this model does. It's going to return contact records, and it's going to be filtered. The Salesforce object name contact is good. I'm going to leave the max number of records as blank because the model condition is actually going to do all the work for me of limiting the number of records in this model. Just as before, we need to take a look at our fields. Because I cloned it, there are already fields on this model. 5 fields, and if you want to double check that everything's correct, you can look over on the left underneath the model. It'll show me the fields I've selected, and there's also a tab over here in the properties pane that will show me the selected fields. I don't need to change it, so I can leave that as it is, but we're here to look at model conditions. So there's another property underneath my model name, conditions. I'm going to click on the Add New Condition icon, and it will give me an empty condition here. Now, this model condition is not much to look at right now, but we see that there are 4 different properties that we'll need to set to make this condition do the work that we want it to do. The first one is field. Model conditions act on fields. And for our example, we're going to have our model condition return records or filter out records that don't match the criteria we're going to set. In this example, we're going to choose to see contact records where the department field has a value of finance. Now that sentence, we're going to recreate it here. So let's start at the beginning of that sentence. So I mentioned that department field is the field we want to filter against. So I'm going to select the field picker icon, and I'm going to scroll down until I find the department field. Where did you go? I'm going to try that again. There it is. I missed it the first time. So now we see this sentence starting to form. Contact records where department, and the operator lets us choose to either match it exactly or to go with false or greater than, less than. We have a lot of different options, but in this case, we're going to keep it simple and we're going to stick with equals. So the department record, the contact record needs to have a department field that is of one specific value. And we know the value in this case, and it's finance. Right. So now we see that we've constructed a sentence that describes what data we want to have in this model. We want this model to have contact records where department is the value of finance. And we want this condition to always be on. Now I kind of skipped over something here in value, and this is where I wanted to make sure I highlighted the fact that there are a lot of different options for how you filter out data in models. We are doing a single specified value for our simple example, but you can also use multiple values. So it might have been finance and operations. You can also use field from another model, which is very powerful when you're wanting to do different types of cross-object functionality within Salesforce. And things like the Salesforce user attribute. If you're wanting to filter out data that's maybe not associated with your profile or your user ID, you can pick up those records, and many other options. Conditions are a very powerful way to fine-tune exactly what data gets into your model. So let's see how this example works. So we've created our model condition, but we don't yet have a data component to display the data that's going to be in this model. Just as we cloned the model, we can also clone components, especially when 2 components might be very similar to each other. So I'm going to click on the clone button, and now I've got 2 of these tables. I'm going to alter the top table and make this one match our contacts filtered model. So select the one on top. And I'm going to change the title because now the title would be incorrect. This table is going to show contacts that are filtered, so I should have the title reflect that change. All right, so I changed the title, and the fields are already in there, so it's exactly the way I need that to be. But before we finish here, I wanted to make one other change. I'm going to scroll down to the contacts not filtered data component of the table. And I'm going to allow us to, I'm going to add something that's going to make it easier for me to confirm that the contacts filtered table is working as expected. So on contacts not filtered, I'm going to select the department field. I'm going to check the box for allow sorting. This will let me quickly sort the values in that column. And I'll show why in just a minute. So we've added a model condition on this model. We added a table component that will connect to that model, and I am glad I checked again because I almost failed you all in my demonstration. One thing that you need to make sure you do with your data components is they will faithfully show the records in whatever model you point them at, and I did not point it at the right model. So I'm going to change the model that this contacts filtered table is pointed at. I'm going to make it point at contacts filtered. Make sure you do that before your preview. Otherwise, the preview will be a disaster. So now I'm going to click preview. Now that I've verified that things are actually going to work as expected, and let's see if I am in fact correct. And yes, I did it. Didn't mess it up. Now we see in this preview that our top table is contacts filtered, and we set up a model condition on the model. It said only show me contact records where the department field has a value of finance. And there are 5 records here matching that. And I mentioned that we can confirm that our model condition is working correctly by looking at some of the data in the contacts not filtered table. So we can use the column sorting to double check, and we see that there are 5 finance records here, so we know that's right. We can also use the search to do it as well. So we can type in correctly. No, there is no Department of Fiancés. Yes, I typed it in correctly. Okay. So by using the search, I was able to confirm that, yes, there are in fact 5 records that have a department field value of finance. Great. So that was our simple example where we demonstrated how model conditions work. We had 2 different models. One had a model condition and one did not. And we saw that when we added a model condition to a model, we were able to get the records that we wanted. In this case, we wanted to see contact records where the department field is the value of finance. There you go. Thanks for watching our video about model conditions, and happy squidifying to you all.